Well, welcome one and all to Regenerative Media TV and another episode of Solutionaries, where we like to showcase the many innovators and solutionaries and luminaries that are at the cutting edge of innovation and the regenerative movement. And as you know, that can be everything from regenerative agriculture to ecological design, soil and water, to many different things, green technology, even talking about green economy, circular economics, and really how to move the big picture forward at such a pivotal and transformational time here on the planet. So I'm your host, Michael DiMartino. Thank you for joining us. And today I'm very honored to have our guest, Phil Hawes, here. He was one of the legal architects on the BioSphere 2 project, and probably for anyone born after, before, I would say, the mid 80s, is well aware of the work with the BioSphere project and the impact it made, and also what was cultivated that came out of that work, which is still relevant and evolving today. But before I get to Phil, I want to acknowledge also another person who's here who helped connect me to Phil Hawes, someone that I've collaborated with. We've had on the show before, and is a filmmaker and very knowledgeable in the area of ecological design. I'd like to welcome the head of the Kenosis Project, Christopher Zelov. So welcome, Christopher.
Good to see you. Good to be part of this.
Absolutely. I know you're on some exciting projects yourself. So before we start, again, I want to welcome everybody. And we're going to pivot over now to our guest of honor here, who is joining us remotely here on Zoom. I believe he's in New Mexico right now and doing a lot of projects. I'd like to welcome again Phil Hawes, the architect of BioSphere 2. So welcome, Phil.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Great, thank you. So just to start off with, if you could tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing now, but more importantly, how you got involved in it and kind of the origins and the germination of the BioSphere 2 project.
Well, I was trying to figure out the other day when I started this particular path, and I believe it was when I was fortunate enough to go to school at Taliesin, which is Frank Lloyd Wright's fellowship in Arizona and also in Wisconsin back in the mid 50s. It kind of started me off in a certain direction that I kept adding on to through the years. Worked for 8 or 10 years with the San Francisco Institute of Architecture, and that's where I met Chris Zoloff. And then I met a bunch of people who I spent 20 years with. We called ourselves the Theater of All Possibilities, and early on decided that we weren't going to do anything except ecological projects, whatever that might mean. And it evolved as we went along, and that's what we did. So for 20 years, we did ecological projects, and after about 14 years, we started working on BioSphere 2, and that took us 7 years to build, to design and build. I lived along with about up to 30, 35 other people on the job site for 7 years while we were designing and building BioSphere 2 outside of Oracle, Arizona. But yeah, it's been a very interesting trajectory for me.
So for folks who might not be aware of it, can you kind of tell us how the BioSphere 2 project emerged? Because many of us know it was kind of a self-contained ecosystem, looking at a lot of the different types of systems that would need to work sustainably and harmoniously together. And I think it started out potentially space-related, but then became a grounded project here in the States, kind of on the land. Can you give us a little bit of the backstory of how that emerged?
We had a conference called a Galactic Conference in 1982, and at one point I was asked to design this spacecraft, and which a spacecraft, of course, is a closed system. And so, in the process of myself and a couple of other people working on the spacecraft ideas, it emerged that we had been expecting to arrive at the point where we felt we could do a world-class ecological project for about 14 years. And so John Allen and Mark Nelson and a bunch of other people that I was working with, Margaret Augustine, Ed Bass, we it seemed like it had come to a head, and a closed system and getting involved in closed system research was the best way to contribute to biological research on the planet. And once we got involved, we started out thinking a lot about space and leaving the planet, going and exploring. But once we got involved in working on it, we discovered that almost nothing really in depth was known about what a closed system like the planet Earth itself, what ran it, what was going on with the plant life and the animal life on it. And we had thought that when we began building or designing the BioSphere project, or decided to do that, when we thought that we would be merely collaborating with the scientists who would have all the answers, and we found out that there were almost no answers to the questions of how you do actually a closed system that can stay alive. What do you have to have in a closed system? When you're going to build a big box and put life inside, how are you going to really keep it going? Very little information on that then, and not very much now, for that matter.
Well, I think one of the things that's amazing, just hearing you talk, of course, I think of people like Buckminster Fuller and Spaceship Earth, and I start to think about people like Frank Lloyd Wright and design. And just again, for those of us in this contemporary day and age, if we do our critical thinking and our research, we find out there are people like you who are really the pioneers and innovators. But did you ever have any interaction or direct relationship to some of the other people who were really at the edge of design and new design and thinking about these types of solutions?
Uh, well, yeah. Once you get involved in that, you find out that everybody pretty much knows everybody else. So some of the people at NASA, um, the, and also other independent people that are working on the idea of space, the final frontier, that sort of thing. And we knew pretty much all of those people before we were finished on the biosphere. Some of our very good friends were the Russian scientists who'd been working on the BIOS 3 aspect of closed systems since 1973, 1972, might even, in Krasnoyarsk, Siberia, and putting people inside of closed systems and seeing how they could survive and what was necessary and that sort of thing. So there's it's not like you start out completely without any background, because there are people that have been thinking about these sorts of things and trying to work with closed systems for some time, although uh, there's no money in it. There's no money in closed system research, or at least they haven't really discovered yet how to milk it for that. So it's hard to get people to put money into something like that. And it's not like the Biosphere 2 project was quite a bit, what, $250 million or something in that range. And so where are you going to get that money except through finding somebody who is interested in doing that kind of thing and becoming a sponsor for it? Because the government wasn't interested. Our government wasn't, the Japanese government wasn't, the Chinese government wasn't, and European government was vaguely, mildly interested, but nothing substantial was happening. So it was one of those, I suppose you'd almost have to say, a magical moment when things came together properly that allowed us to do that work.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, we think about it today and just the importance of having real world research and proof of concept and due diligence and looking at statistics and how, of course, we want to be more sustainable, more ecologically, I say biomimicry, working with nature's intelligence, not always trying to recreate a wheel. But of course, we live in a world where technology plays such an important part. So for me, thinking back to decades ago and the work that you're doing, you're so far ahead of the curve. So again, a great honor to have you on the call today and just to learn more about BioSphere. And in a little bit, I want to find out more about kind of what you're doing today and how that work has continued to propagate and some of the other projects. But I did want to ask you a little bit about do you personally have a basic, I would say, philosophy of sustainability, sustainable development, something we can give our viewers today that they can kind of maybe help inspire their perspective or shift their perspective a little bit as more and more people start to see the collapse of the environment and the need for what we say more sustainable, green, or regenerative solutions?
Yeah, well, sustainability, of course, the big problem is that it's like so many words that are thrown around these days that very few people bother to look it up in a dictionary. But essentially, to sustain something means to hold it up indefinitely, sustaining life indefinitely. For example, if you're going to build a container like Biosphere 2, is no mean feat. And to do the same thing in the closed container of planet Earth, when our track record is so bad as the human beings have gone in there and we've considered it to be our oyster to pick as we eat as many oysters as we want to eat, no matter what. And in the process of doing that, we've depleted our natural resources, whether they're living resources or fossil fuel resources or whatever resource you want to look at. We've been very profligate in the way we've approached that sort of thing and not very circumspect. Haven't put much thought into uh, the future and how long do we expect the human species to survive? Well, I've been working with my students, giving them an idea that to have something sustainable, being able to do what you're doing, whether it's the way you grow your food, or the way you make your clothing, or the way you do your transportation. That's probably about the least. Transportation is probably our least sustainable of all the things we do at this point. Not just because of the fossil fuel, but because of the actual automobiles themselves. But we're not doing anything as a species, uh, a modern people. We're not doing anything that's sustainable. You pick a subject, whether it's food, water, sewage, clothing, transportation, healthcare, none of these things are being done sustainably. I've been using 1,000 to 2,000 years. Is there anything we're doing that you could do for 2,000 years without destroying the environment, substantially destroying the environment? The answer is no. And I've been saying this now for years, and nobody's ever contradicted me. At least they haven't come up with anything that contradicted that idea. So this is very bad. If you're not sustainable, it means you're unsustainable. And if you're unsustainable, that means that at some point in the not too far distant future, your species will cease to exist. So I would say that that's the basis under which, whether you're using the word regenerative or sustainable, it doesn't really matter. The idea is the same. And that if we are interested in the human species, we have to think at least in terms of millions of years.
Absolutely. And
And
I think
it
it's
hadn't occurred to me till recently that my little piddly ass 1,000 to 2,000 years wasn't really very good. So I got into the dinosaurs. I said, well, how long did they last? They lasted 150 to 180 million years. So I'm shooting for the human species to have at least that long.
absolutely. And what a paradox, because under the current administration, and I will say that I'm a person more about policy than politics or people or different types of political deities. And but I've come to learn that we're under the current administration, we have this drill baby drill attitude with really no plan for the vision, or they call it the the new green scam. So, part of me doing this series is about help to empower individuals and organizations to become more green, more sustainable, and starting to roll up their sleeves and having everybody kind of take an active part in this, what we call, or Buckminster Fuller calls, the regenaissance. And I like the word regenerative because in some ways we kind of have to allow things that don't work anymore to collapse and become the compost for a new paradigm and new innovative ways at looking at things. But in the same time, we have to kind of preserve that traditional wisdom, whether it's going back to indigenous cultures and their relationship. We're not talking about going and living in a teepee or a cave per se, but finding what still works and how to work in tandem in partnership with nature and nature's intelligence. So I definitely appreciate what you're saying. If you'd like to comment on that, and what I'd like to do is here in just a moment is pull up that little 1 or 2 minute clip of your video that we can share in the link and introduce people to some more of your content. And then after that, we'll pivot and talk a little bit about maybe some of the work that you're doing today that again is bringing the next level of the work you did with BioSphere 2 into actualization, working, living, breathing, see it, touch it, hear it, smell it, prototypes of different types of solutions, not just, we're here talking about it today.
Well,
So,
we have to go back. I mean, we're modern in that we have electricity and we have medical advancement and all sorts of scientific method, for example, and other than next to the reductionist aspect of scientific method, we now have integrative science, which is what the Biosphere 2 project was all about. But we do have to go back and pick up on how people have built their homes for thousands of years. We can't continue with our value added approach to everything, for everything. You take a material and start modifying it and putting human effort into it, and creating a new material just because you can sell a new material. We're going to have to to go back in certain things and go forward in other things. We can't throw away our past. And I've been very much involved in Adobe construction and plan to be doing more of that in Portugal in the near future, hopefully. Rammed earth, Adobe, light clay, cob, all these different modifications and uses of earthen materials. And so when you think about building homes, you have to go back to the basic materials, wood, lumber, rocks, mud, all these things that have stood us in such good stead for thousands of years. Uh, Even concrete blocks fall apart, and there are many different ways of making concrete that are more substantial than what we're working with these days. So I'm not a person who's involved in bringing on the future with, oh, let's have some new technologies. We have all the technologies pretty much that we need to become sustainable. We still have some things we have to learn how to do, like how do we integrate our utilities, our soft utilities, our human utilities. They're the hard utilities, which are things like electricity, sewage disposal, water systems, and all that. These are easy to deal with because they're just physical. But then you start bringing in things like government, education, insurance, healthcare, legal systems, governmental systems. Now you're talking about what you would call the soft systems, and they're very difficult to integrate in to become actually sustainable or regenerative, depending on which word you want to use. We don't know how to do that. We can't agree on that. What we can agree on quite easily are the hard things like electricity and sewage and water and how to treat those kinds of things. Those are the easy things. But when you think about where we are as a human species, we're not we're probably barely into adolescence. That's why things are so messed up. We're having a lot of trouble getting and growing up. And so if you think of things that way, you can become a little bit more forgiving about the insanity that people are willing to put up with and to generate, because you can say, well, they're not even grown up people yet. We're not really grown up as a species.
It's a hard act to follow, that biosphere, but it's got to be leading into something. So what's it leading into? I had learned certain things on the biosphere, and I learned a lot of things by working with a group of people for 20 years. And I considered from where I am that to go from the Biosphere 2 project into an ecologically sustainable village is a completely logical step. The next step is to take some of the things that were learned from that project and apply them to human communities. And dating back to 1963, I went into graduate school in the planning, and my interest has always been small-scale neighborhood development. I've never wanted to build skyscrapers, so I'm more oriented toward small-scale community type orientation, and decided that architecture was all very well, and I was interested in architecture, but I'm really more interested in developing a framework to build communities.
Thank you.
Oh.
I was actually going to do this from the teepee today here in Crestone, which is a beautiful environment. I get fresh air and natural materials, but it got really cold and windy. So here I am.
Yeah, I've lived in a teepee. It could get really cold. It was in Santa Fe in wintertime. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Well, we're just a few hours north of you. As you know, we're like an hour and a half north of Taos, and I think you're about an hour and a half or so south of Taos.
oh
But
no,
with
well, yeah, Santa Fe, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
more than
but
that. But that
with the little bit of time we have left, so what's the project and the work that you're doing right now? You had talked about natural building and different types of materials, and I know, working with people in the Amazon, some of those might not be as effective based on taking a climate or a bioregion into consideration. But could you tell us a little bit about the project you're doing in Portugal, correct?
well, coming off what you just said, yes, the bioregion would be your basic framework, and then whatever you did inside of that bioregion would have to do with the materials and your climate and the cultures that have existed in that climate and in that area. In Portugal, basically, it's all pretty much the same. It seems to me that there are seven uh, central systems that need to be addressed. And again, I'm falling back just because it's easier, I guess. And I don't know enough to do the soft systems that I mentioned earlier. I mean, I'm not qualified to tell you what kind of government you should have, for example, but we can talk about things like electrical systems. In other words, the energy that you would have, that energy would be one of the main seven systems. Food production and processing is one of the seven. Uh, the building materials that you're going to use and the methods of construction is a central system. Your water is a central system. Your sewage treatment is central. Your health care for your community and the people, and your transportation, which is such a ghastly thing in the 21st century worldwide. There's something now like 1.6 billion automobiles on the road in the world, and just in the United States, I've done a bit of research into it. And just in the United States, every year we spend something like $5.5 trillion supporting the automobile in one way or another. And that's just the stuff that can be counted. And then there's a lot of costs that you can't really deal with, such as what happens after a family loses their main breadwinner in a car wreck, for example. So it's a huge issue, and these seven central systems are where you have to start. and they're the same in a sense everywhere. You have to have pure water. How are you going to purify your water? Well, if you do some research into water purification systems, you'll find out that they all have a downside. To actually really take out the contaminants and purify water that we're going to drink, there is no, as of right now, as far as I know, there's no easily articulated system that, oh, this is the best way to go. This is just really, this is the top way to go, and it doesn't have a downside because they all have downsides. So these are the kinds of things that no matter where you are or what bioregion you're working in, that you have to deal with. Water, your energy sources. Where are you going to get your energy? Are you fortunate enough to be in an area where a tidal bore comes zooming up the creek? Where I lived there for a while in Australia, we had 30-foot tides. And there was a place called Walcott Inlet where there was just about a couple of kilometers across the opening to this big inlet. And every few hours, of course, you get a tidal change with 30 feet of water coming through there. And people had been looking at it for years as an obvious source of energy, electricity, but nobody lived there. So what are you going to do with all this energy that's being produced, but no one there? But these are all issues that a lot of these things have old solutions that have been around for literally thousands of years that we can still tap into, like heating and cooling and things of that sort. I'm particularly interested in cool towers, like they've had in the Middle East for over 1,000 years, in places like Iran and Iraq and Egypt, of course. In Cairo, there's a house in Cairo that's built in the 1300s that has cool tower type of cooling, collecting the air as it passes. And so these are the kinds of things that I'm interested in, and much more really than any of the new technologies. I'm much more
Fantastic.
interested in the
What's
way we've been doing things for thousands of years successfully.
absolutely no need to recreate the wheel. And I had recently the opportunity to interview someone you collaborated with, Mark Nelson, who was very much involved in like the waste aspect of the BioSphere project. And I know you were connected through Synergia Ranch. Is that correct, in New Mexico?
Yeah, Synergia Ranch is the way we pronounce it. Yeah, yeah. I lived out there, and then when we went and worked on other projects around the world, we always worked and lived at the projects we were on. And that's why the Biosphere took 7 years to build, and so we lived on job site for those 7 years. Those of us that are working on it, yeah.
Fantastic. So
Australia and Nepal, different places.
incredible, incredible. Truly a pioneer and innovator, and still going strong. And appreciate.
Strong? I'm not sure how strong. Do it. Still going. Still
Good,
going.
good. Well,
Yeah.
you're definitely an inspiration. And it's interesting. I'm kind of between the baby boomer generation and the what they call Generation X. So, I grew up with all of this information that was happening during the time of the baby boomers, of human rights and civil rights and the Back to the Land movement and the whole emergence of sustainability and things like Earth Day and all of these concepts, and a renaissance in music and art and culture. And then the 80s, everything kind of became very homogenistic and commercially centric and stuff. So it's definitely great to meet you and kind of get inspired. I definitely feel like there is this renaissance, this regeneissance happening where it's like, let's go back to ideas that's work, because what we're doing doesn't really work right now. And kind of, as you said, I call it full spectrum solutions. We need to look at everything of, um, you know, uh, traditional wisdom, natural building, ecological design, biomimicry. We need to look at the ideas of conservation, also resilience, climate change, fire mitigation, working with water. I did a huge project in Sacramento called the Sacramento River Watershed Project, but no one seemed to care about water contamination and the damming up and the salinization of Central Valley. And I did that for 18 years. We made some
Oh my God.
progress, but we were up against some big players, let's say in the agricultural oligarchs of California that really make billions of dollars on water privatization, but more or less, trying to find solutions for some of the problems that still affect us. And of course, most of them are human created. So, people say save the earth. I'm like, well, educate humans to save themselves from themselves. Because what we saw during COVID, when there was a couple of years of things being shut down, that the environment did start to regenerate and come back, whether it was coral reefs or fish populations or wildlife or forests. It's just that we had to mitigate and stop the negative human impact. So before we finish, I do want to get some words of wisdom from you, but I want to kind of go back to Christopher Zeloff if there's anything he'd like to add to the conversation or any thoughts or questions before we get towards finishing the interview for today. So again, back to Christopher from the Kenosis Project in Philadelphia, PA, the city of brotherly love. So welcome back, Christopher.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, that was interesting interview in process. The film was called City 21, and Phil was talking about a concept called polytechniques. Maybe you want to go into that a little bit more, Phil, and frame your approach.
The example I like to use of polytechniques means that whatever technology you're using, you see, even language is a technology, isn't it? Mathematics is a technology. All these things that we've invented as human beings are technologies. And we built a ship. I say we, the people I was working with that also built the BioSphere 2 project. We built a ship that was made of ferro cement, which is a very new concept, originally invented by a Frenchman about 1850, but came into during the 60s. It became a popular sort of thing to do, is to make a ferro cement boat. So we built this ship, and it had a hull thickness about an inch and a quarter, and it was designed. The design was taken straight off of a model of a Chinese junk, an ocean-going Chinese trading junk, and that was the same form of the hull that we used. Then we used the masts instead of being tree trunks. We used the aluminum masts instead of using ordinary hemp say canvas. We used nylon and Dacron for our sails, and we had a diesel engine in it because you need something to when you're sailing close to the land, you have to be able to maneuver very quickly and is to escape disasters. And so any ship will have to have an auxiliary power source of some sort, whether it's electrical or diesel powered, as ours was, or whatever you might have. So this is called polytechnics. You're taking a technology that's thousands of years old. You're using another technology that was developed between 1850 and 1960, pretty much the ferro cement. You're taking other technologies for the sails themselves that use a different kind of fabric. You've got a power source that is auxiliary, so that you're not completely at the mercy of the ocean and its anger. And you put those things together, and you've got a superior object because you've used polytechnics. You take whatever technique you need from whatever place and time you need it.
So you're going to use that as part of your design for the new biospheric house in Portugal, that philosophy.
Well, of course, you want to use that as a philosophy no matter what you're doing. Even, you can be doing healthcare, and you may be using acupuncture and some very, very advanced, surgical technology at the same time. You want to use whatever is available to you. You don't want to become a stuck in the mud character, stuck in the 2021 period, or stuck in the Renaissance, or stuck in Egypt in 3,000 years ago. I mean, come on, we can do better than that. We can, you know, pick and choose.
Absolutely. I love that term. I'm going to actually quote you on that. And I really appreciate your time, really, as a luminary innovator and someone who really broke the ground, literally and figuratively, with the type of work that you've been doing. And I will say, for me, as a what I call full spectrum regenerative solutionary, we do look at the interface of things, and we also do talk about the idea of health and wellness. Our internal biome is as important as the external biome, and how to find a balance of healthy people, healthy planet. So before we finish, do you have any last words of wisdom we
Yeah,
can
yeah,
share with our
I
viewers?
do. I don't know if they're words of wisdom or not, but uh, I I hope that you get to live as long as I have lived. I we don't live very long, and we lose track of things. We think that we're really the apex wherever we are, and I was born during the Depression. And then I experienced World War II and the stuff that's gone on since then. So the longer you live, the broader your span of what you've encountered, but also you start to see the way the puzzle fits together in a very, very different way than if you just have a short lifetime. So I've been extremely fortunate to have had the opportunity to not only to live a long time, but to have my life has been oriented toward taking risks and having adventures. That was one of our big toasts when we were doing Biosphere 2. Take risks and have adventures. And another one that goes along with that is to throw your heart out in front of you and run to catch up with it. If you just live your life on those two things, you'll have a very interesting life. Taking risks, having adventures, and throwing your heart out in front of you and then running to catch it.
Fantastic. Well, definitely words of wisdom and pearls of truth over the span of your life and your incredible legacy and body of work. I want to thank you for taking some time today. And again, if you kind of came in halfway through this video, we've been talking with Phil Hawes, the architect for Biosphere 2, who is still going strong and doing an amazing project that he's working on in Portugal. If people are interested in more information, is there a way that they can email you or get in touch with you, Phil?
Sure. My email is Phil B as Phil, just Phil, B as in boy, and then HAWES at Gmail. And anybody's welcome to contact me that way.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And I didn't quite to be out in my teepee today, but I appreciate having this time with you. And I'm going to go out and try to get some cold wind and some sunshine in here. And just appreciate your time. I know we'll stay in touch. There's a lot of stuff I'd like to share, but today we really just wanted to focus on you and your legacy and your work and the incredible amount of advisorship and consulting insight that you have as we continue to midwife the regenaissance. So thank you so much. And thank you for Christopher Zeloff and Kenosis Project for connecting more dots and the great luminaries and people that he brings forth through Regenerative Media TV. So have a great afternoon and a great spring equinox coming up in just a few days.
Thank you. It's been nice being here with you.
Bye.